outside, just outside. You don't give me that one. Who's that?
1, 2.
If someone was
1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2.
Okay. Hi, I'm on the normal phone. What's up? How are you going? Okay, the sound check is for more or less around here. That's using a remote lapel mic. You okay? And your streaming quality? Good. Okay. Alright. Okay, my friend. Okay, I'll keep it. Now to stream it and everything else and start promoting it, they can start doing that now, eh? And I'll just leave it all on all the way through. Yeah, I think it is on, man.
No, Mike's turn.
Let me just have a look. Mic level manual. What do you take up of it? Okay. Alright. Okay. Okay, that's cool. That's cool. Okay, yeah, I'll record it on the other camera. Shall I please record it on the regular as well? Okay. Thank you. Thanks very much. I'll just put it around for half an hour just in case. Okay. Thank you. The live stream is running like that. Do you want to just check what it looks like?
No, this is perfect. 16.
Okay. So we are also live streaming it through our Facebook page. So, okay, great. Okay, we've got someone right. Check if this works.
That other one is not good. It's just like that. If you want to use that, it sometimes speaks well, but it is the times that it just doesn't. So this one doesn't. Yeah.
Okay, so you have to put your mouth right up against
Yeah.
posture.
Yeah.
Shwet,
Just
Shwet, just stand in front of the purple there a second.
People just have to
put a bit close.
put it a bit closer.
See what this thing's doing. I want to come behind you back there. Okay, I'm just doing the tracking now.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Right.
I got it. I put the thing underneath it. I put a cookie under it. I think
We were
so.
able to acquire where would you like to do it so that they can get our logo and they are able to?
Pretty well done.
I only do Bitcoins.
I'm saying it's so he is forsaking it, not that is a thing, but it's just forsaking. That's
Yeah. The trust, if you put the trust one there, we could get it all in. But up to you.
Well, you move the purple one more.
Yeah?
It's like being an investigator.
You see how this tracking works? It's unbelievable. That thing is refocusing on you every.
Really?
Yeah, the whole time.
That's amazing, because I was always worried, because if you move, you leave your
Yeah,
spot.
no. So now both these cameras now track
Wow.
the whole time. So the one thing I haven't been able to conquer is this microphone.
Yeah, but you
I beat it. How did you do it? When you are calm. Go over there, Shwet. Sorry. I want to show you something. You see how?
Okay, yeah.
There's Shwet, right? So you say now follow. And
Okay.
as he moves around, the camera follows him.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Owen, I think she's here.
Then we can put this one on this one.
There.
absolutely engaged with it. That was
This should be my last adjustment.
but you just like what you did.
Okay. Sound. Sound check, sound check.
ngazinayo leya
Umnyama ungayeka. Yeke ngisasebenzisa lena mina ku
Sound check, sound check. That's better. Sound check, sound check.
izihloko ngakawo asebenzi. Lo umela wabafunga indaba andazi ngisina yini linzima umela umuntu. Hayi. Hey, akayenze tu.
Yeah, we passed it. That's why.
Now we have nice high sounds. How long have we got still?
But I know they say that is what they use.
So the GoPro does the count. Kenton 217, that's right. So it's on there already. So now I just go to my GoPro app, which is somewhere in here.
That is so cool.
I need to go down a bit even.
That happens in But I would say that it's a lady.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. We, unfortunately, we're planning to have Archbishop Taro Makgoba Skype in, and he's in London at the moment, and unfortunately he couldn't be here. But technology always lets you down at exactly the right time or the wrong time. So we tested it and it worked. And all I'd like to say is that the Archbishop was here. He's very much here in spirit as well, and hopefully we can try to connect later to him. So I just needed to preface that. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker to you this evening, who needs certainly no introduction. And just in relation to the protocol, I'd like to acknowledge Mrs. Mungi Makgoba, who's representing the Archbishop Taro Makgoba Development Trust. Thank you very much for coming here. Vice Chancellor Dr. Sizwe Mabizela. Vice Chancellor Dr. Peter Clayton. It's always amazing when you meet somebody who's as well known as Mrs. Michelle, and she says, "Hi, I'm Grassa." It speaks volumes for the person that she is. She's a renowned international advocate for women's and children's rights and has been a social and political activist over many decades. She's a former freedom fighter and was the first education minister of Mozambique. The contributions to the Africa Progress Panel, United Nations Secretary General's Millennium Development Goals Advocacy Group, a high-level panel on post-2015 development agenda, and now as a member of the UN Secretary General's Sustainable Development Goals Advocacy Group, have been widely appreciated. She is a member of the Elders, Girls Not Brides, board chair of the Partnership for Maternal, Newborn and Child Health, ambassador for Every Woman, Every Child, president of the SOAS, University of London, chancellor of the University of Cape Town, board chair of the African Centre for the Constructive Resolution of Disputes, president of the Foundation for Community Development, founder of the Zazile Institute for Child Development. As founder of the Grassa Michelle Trust, she has focused more recently on advocating for women's economic and financial empowerment. education for all, an end to child marriage, food security and nutrition, and promoting democracy and good governance. We tried to get to Mrs. Michelle 2 years ago. We never gave up. We had to reschedule this year because she had a clash with an appointment at the United Nations. The Secretary General said, "I need you here." And we understand that we had to take second place. Mrs. Michelle, all I can say is absolutely better late than never.
Good evening. I'm sorry I didn't see this before, because I would have asked him not to say even half of it. And you must be surprised, but how does she do all those things? Perhaps I should explain myself. I don't do things. I get other people to do things. I really, I have been always a strong believer in networks and the power of people working together around networks. So what I do is to identify some of the networks which are aligned with the work I do and bring them together, strengthen them whenever we can. And sometimes I did actually encourage to start from scratch. But they are doing the work. I'm taking just the credit, you know? So don't be very much impressed about this. With UN, it's simply because we were talking about this just before we came here. We happen to have the privilege of being in certain platforms. And we need to put there the voice of Africa, the face of African women. So what we are doing, actually, I'm taking your mandate to those bodies which the Secretary General is asking me to be part of. But coming to our talk this evening, I want to start also by saying what a privilege really for me to have an opportunity to share with you some thoughts. And please lower your expectation. There's no lecture. There's no lecture. I do not know how to do lectures. I have some kind of conversation with people, and then, of course, I appreciate if we can have a period of questions and answers. I've been asked to talk about rebooting for a value-based society. Value-based society. And I thought perhaps we should start by very quickly looking at what are the value systems around which many of us here have been socialized in. I will be focusing on the African heritage because that's what I know better by experience. I'm not excluding others, but it's simply because I needed to be a bit more specific. As Africans, we are socialized to think always at the image of the other. We never are educated and molded to focus on I or we. We say you and I, and then when we say we, is always in collective. In one sense, I'm saying the African identity of the being is a collective identity versus the individual individual identity which is being instilled according to many of the Western cultures. We talk very often of Ubuntu as a commonplace, but without really thinking deeply what it means. When you say, I am because you are saying, I do not exist without you. And that is the meaning of who we are. And when we say, Siyabonan, when we greet, did you hear me? We say Siyabonan. Si, it's a plural, okay? When you say Molweni, it's a plural. And you don't address an adult, a child doesn't address an adult or an elderly person and saying you say ninjani. It's a plural. The reflecting the knowledge and the wisdom an elderly person is carrying as someone who represents generations which have been. And a child recognizes that in an elderly person. So we are socialized always in these two ways of looking at ourselves, of the collective, of the respect of the elderly, and even respect of the family. Let me give you some examples. It's not by chance that a marriage in African custom, it is not a marriage of two. It is a coming together of two families. You know that. And two families negotiate actually to know who are you and to understand the cultural way of being of the family which is coming to us for our child, our girl. And they meet, they communicate to come to take responsibility that the family, the new nucleus family which is going to be formed is within the cultural understanding of the two broad families. You don't have in our culture what sometimes happens in other parts of the world where a child comes and say, I'm getting married next week. It doesn't happen like that. It doesn't happen like that in our, but it's just to say it is entrenched in the way we understand, and I'm coming here to a very strong social institution, family. There's no family of two. There's family of two broader families. Then we say it takes a village to raise a child. It means the child who is born, it doesn't belong only, you see, to the two families I spoke about, but it belongs to the broader community around. And all the other grown-ups in that community, they take a responsibility to raise that child, to see how a child grows, how behaves. The value systems which are transmitted to that child are not done only within the privacy of the family, but it's also collectively. When you have, for instance, a child who is born, the celebration of this is again a collective event. Particularly because we as humans, we are challenged with the phenomenon of death. There it's no longer family alone. It's even neighbors, even family who you do not know of, but if there's death in one family, everybody goes in and everybody gives support. Everybody warms your heart in moments of loss, etc. What does it mean? That our value system, which anchors a human being, is always a collective value, of collective value. And why this has been important in our resilience is because even in times of storm, when the family is strong, when the family is together, then you navigate better against the storms. So part of who we are, how we are grounded and rooted in some space, it is guaranteed by this collective way of being. Now, our languages, which we have not studied enough, and I would encourage the university here to look precisely of within the social science, but specifically to understand the philosophy of life which is being kept. Our languages are actually the custodians of our heritage, because that's where we express ourselves in a way. Sometimes you say, I can't translate this in English, right? I can't translate this in Portuguese, you see? And that is something we should cherish. We should really instill more and more of how do we conceive, we understand ourselves within the universe of human relationships, but also the universe of our relationship with nature. Africans will tell you, according to the moon, according to the seasons, what is happening in being. We say everyone, it's astrology, but we have a specific way of expressing how nature talks to us and how we're related to nature. So I wanted us to start by this value system, which I'm not going to elaborate in detail, but this is what grounds us, or it should continue to ground us. Then in South Africa, we have this beautiful, I will take you back a little bit to even to our Freedom Charter. The Freedom Charter, which influenced actually the Constitution, is the guiding principles and values of South Africans or everyone who live in it. It's not only to be born here, but you live here and you are embraced by the people of South Africa. That's how the Freedom Charter starts. And the Constitution, again, it also started the same way, that we, the people of South Africa, recognize the injustices of our past, but we honor those who suffered for justice and freedom in our land. We respect those who have worked to build and develop our country, and believe that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity. This is the framework of the value system we adopt as a modern, if you like, a modern society. We pledge also, when we adopt the Constitution, to heal the divisions of the past and establish a society based on democratic values, social justice, and the fundamental human rights. It's important to remember this. And we say, we lay the foundations for a democratic and open society in which government is based on the will of the people and every citizen is equally protected by law, improve the quality of life of all citizens, and free the potential of each person. This is the boundaries in which we say the value system, which combine what I said as African knowledge and African way of being, but now enriched by these fundamental values which are enshrined in our Constitution. So, I want to take you to some reflection of why do we have some values unlived we are not living up to those values. I'm not going to be conclusive, but we have been witnessing more and more brutalities against each other. Today, I don't want to talk about the top down. I want to talk about the human relations. How many cases we hear of people, particularly women and children, who are assaulted, and according to some statistics, they say children, 1 in every 3 young South Africans have experienced some form of sexual abuse in their lives. 1 in 3. And they are children. They are young people. We do hear of near daily reports on gang rape, sexual assault in school grounds. When I said the first one, it's in the home. Now I'm talking of school grounds. Every 3 days, a child is killed due to abuse and neglect. That is like a nightmare to us. The child murder rate for South Africa is more than double the global average. And we hear this, and we seem to have got used to it. We hear and we carry on with our lives as if it doesn't have anything to do with us. We learn also through statistics that 40% of men assault their partners daily, and nearly half of men are abusing their women every single day. And we know a woman dies at the hands of her intimate partner every 8 hours. So every day, there are at least 3 women in South Africa who die in the hands of their partners. Why I'm saying this? It has to do with the human relations, with the human response or lack of response to the values I talked about at the beginning. In African settings, at least the traditional ones, even the households and the villages were built somehow to become some kind of round, so that at the middle you have children and women and elderly to be protected if anything happens. Even the configuration of how the household works. Children are considered to be a sacred, a sanctity of life of a child. And women are revered because they are considered to be like the continuation of what God has given to human species to reproduce ourselves. So women are revered. Elderly people are mentioned already. So what happens? What really happens when you hear stories of an adult who assaults a child of 9 months of age, of 2 years of age? What is happening? And you will say, well, but this person is insane. Of course he is insane. But how low we have come when these kind of issues happen in our society, regardless of any sense of boundaries. Let me come to another example. What we see in our schools, children assaulting other children, and sometimes even taking pictures and going viral, etc., etc. It's an indication of generations which have no sense of boundaries, of what is wrong, what is right. They have no sense. And now we have to ask, what has happened if we get to that situation? Part of it we can say, South Africa has at least 3 generations of parents, at least 3 generations of parents who have not been brought up in a structured family. You remember the migration system? Yeah? So you have people who have grown up without the space in which you build that sense of love and care, of principles, of values I was talking about. They never had. Then they become parents, and their children become parents as well. And you have a system in which generations after generations, they have never experienced that, precious environment which many of us have had in our own families. And this is something we have to take note. Then we have the impact of HIV, which also has robbed a great deal of a generation of parents, and then children are brought up by grandmothers, and then some of them actually, children are bringing up other children. They never had a normal family, which would help them to develop this sense of boundaries and understanding what you do and what you cannot do. But in the meantime, the movements also from rural to urban have broken the village community which I was talking about. It doesn't exist anymore. In the sense that the idea of it takes a village to raise a child, in these townships where we are no longer a village. So there is not the community responsibility which all the families around will be raising these children within a certain context. I'm sure you have heard also of statistics which say something like 40% of children in this country, they are living with their mothers, not because the fathers have died, sometimes they are somewhere else, but they are not with their mothers. So these children are also living in families, growing in families where they don't have a father figure. It's only the mother. And then it's mothers who are working, and most of the time they leave the children into an institution while they are going to earn a living for themselves and these children alone. We have dilemmas in our society which have broken the systems which were, the pillars of the values we are talking about. So, when I raise this, we can say value-based society. It is important to say the most important, in my view, the most important unit to develop those values is the family, where you come from. And all of us, if you think really, you see the difference, where you have come from, what you were given as love and care and guidance as a family. And we have, and I'm saying South Africa has a crisis because we have too many families which are unstructured. And this is going on and on. Then we have also schools, which, as I mentioned, not always because they are too big, either because the parents are not paying much attention to what's going on in schools. Even our school governing bodies, sometimes they do work, other times they do not work. So the school alone is failing to become the second home for a child to be built in certain values, okay? For me, there are 3 institutions which are fundamental to build this value system. It's the family, it's the school, and it's a religious place. And I'm saying religious place, I don't want to call it church, because if you are a Muslim, there's no church, there's mosque, but a religious space where families regularly do go, and they have that sense of solidarity, of working together. These three institutions, when they work properly, they complement one another, and they give a child a space to understand exactly how you become a social being. And as a social being, what are your responsibilities, but also what society has to give you and to provide you as a space in which you navigate. Because of this crisis, I think our value systems are under threat. Let me come to the public space and ask, why does it happen when we read newspapers, we watch television, we hear all these things, but you don't seem to have a sense of outrage? Do you hear outrage? Do you see movements of outrage to say, enough is enough, this is not us, we cannot continue to have this as part of what defines us as society? Where are the women's groups? To come out and say, gender violence? No. Women's bodies are not to be used like that. And also to say, we as women, we are not going to take the brunt, but we'll take, the lead in changing. Because at the end of the day, also, we are mothers of these young people. Where are the women's movement? The outreach, one sense, but also taking responsibility. I can give credit to young people, at least in universities. They have come out, young people, they have come in universities against rape, against insecurity in campuses. Here at Rhodes, you had a case, but in many, I'm related to UCT, and we are grappling with this kind of thing, but it's young people who are coming up and say, we are not going to accept it, we need protection. But we don't hear from other levels of society the outrage to dissociate ourselves with, because yes, we are 56 million of South Africans. It's not all of us. There are perhaps, I don't know, I have no sense of how many millions, but perhaps 1 million people who are doing this, and they are not isolated. They don't feel the pressure from society that we are not going to allow you to continue to do this, and to make the pressure which at the village level used to exist. You go out of the norms and the village will be there. And there were systems to say, this is not accepted. And we don't hear this today. That's about people's behavior. But it also comes even with our political leadership. We all say, but corruption. Have we really come up strongly against corruption? Or we seem to talk about it, we are uneasy about it, but have we sent a very strong and clear message that we are not going to tolerate leaders who are corrupt? Have we? I'm talking of outrage again. Have we come strongly and say, leaders who are elected to serve, if they don't serve, then they don't deserve to be leaders. No, we talk about it. But when the moment of truth comes, we continue to elect exactly the same people. What I'm trying to say is that we seem as a society we seem to have become overwhelmed, and we tolerate, that's what I want to say. We have a high levels of tolerance to violence. So violence, yes, it's part of us, and it's as if it's normal. Other people would say we have normalized violence as a part of our life. And we have normalized corruption as part of our life. We have accepted that, yes, it's not right for a public figure to behave A, B, C, D, but it's fine. It's fine because he or she can be there, can continue to be there. I'm bringing it to society because this is what I've been asked to talk about. What kind of society are we? We have these very high levels of tolerance. Tolerance of violence, tolerance of corruption, tolerance of behaviors which are not the ones we have spoken about in our constitution. So we as South Africans also, we tend to look at our challenges and say, oh, the government and the judiciary. Let me come again to issues of gender violence. When you hear voices is that the police has to act much better, the prosecutors have to do their job, and the judges have to be. It is important for them to do that. We want them to do that. But listen, violation of women, it happens in the privacy of a home. So there's no judiciary system which will be in every single house to tell people how they should behave, to respect the children, to respect the elderly, to respect their wives. There's no police for that. Our police is us as human beings, our behavior. The way we look at those things and we live with them without the courage to say no. I'm bringing this to say value-based society resides in living the values of the places, of those basic institutions which I mentioned, our families, our schools, our churches and mosques. It has to be a daily behavior and daily attitude of every single one of us. We don't lack definition of principles. No, we do. We do have them. And they're very clear. And you will find in many times research about it. But it's about how you live them in detail of your life. And we have to question ourselves, how do we go there? And now to finalize, because I've been too long, I want to challenge our tertiary institutions to give us the kind of, I will call it the architecture of how we begin to address these ills of our society. Because perhaps we do not know, all of us, how do we begin to lick the wounds, to heal, and then to empower ourselves to be healthy in our spirits and our minds. Perhaps we do not know how to do it, but science can help us to give us at least the architect. And I'm appealing that it's the responsibility of our tertiary education, our tertiary institutions, particularly our social sciences, social science departments, our researchers, really to build a coalition in which we begin to say, if we are to touch our own souls, if we are to change our minds, and if we are to change our behavior, if we are to be sharp against injustices, then we need to have this kind of social architect, not in abstract. So I would say, Rhodes, thank you for inviting me, but I came now, I have given you a task, and I will want to hear from you. 2 days ago, I was at UWC, University of Western Cape, and I left them also with sort of a similar task, but in a different angle. But my point is simple. We don't seem to have a clear approach to our own transformation as human beings. We have plans which are the Constitution, the political ones. We have laws, we have institutions, and we have regulations, you name it. But this is outside. I'm talking about the inside of ourselves, our inner self. How do we deal with? And then it can come to issues of gender acceptance, racial acceptance. And yes, you can say many times, and I have heard this and I know it is part of it, it is poverty. Listen, it's not all poor people who are rapists, who are abusers. It's not only poverty. That's what I want to say. I don't minimize it. But I don't think we are hiding into issues which are not necessarily of our total responsibility individually, because it's part of the system. It's the government which has to do this. If it's someone else to do, we are quick to understand the problem. But when it comes to question ourselves in our behavior, we hide and we don't have a plan. That's what I'm trying to say. So yes, let's make pressure on those who are running our public life to do it better. But let's accept that we as individuals, in our inner self, we also need a plan of healing. And that healing, I can't find it anyway. And I bring it to you as an institution which has extremely qualified people who have the tools of analyzing human behavior and to tell us how do we undo these things so that we can have a future in which we acknowledge, we respect, we value the dignity, and the dignity of every single one of us. You are a child, you are young, you are adult, you are old, you are black, you are white, you are yellow, you are red, whatever you are, but you are a human being, and because of that, you have the dignity which everyone has to respect. That's where we have to go. And you have to tell us, how do we get there? It can take 20, 30, 50 years, but please, give us the framework. Thank you so much.
So I'm pleased to say that I was chatting to the Archbishop. He says the live stream is coming through crystal clear. So
Can I sit there so that I can wait with it?
So it would be great if we could trend on hashtag if you are to touch our own souls. For me, that was the key message tonight. We're very happy to take questions now. The one roving mic isn't working very well, So I will just ask if you could please stand up and ask your question, and then if you can't hear it, I will try to paraphrase it. Yes, Philip. If you please just stand up and
if we look at what sort of society we are and where we came from, the colonial and apartheid societies were very authoritarian, and we now have a very liberal constitution. And it occurs to me that neither of those things may be a very good fit to the kind of values that you've been talking about. Should we not be going back to first principles and saying, well, if we are going to develop a modern African society based on those values, have we actually got the rules and framework right?
So I answer one by one, or?
let's take 3 questions, and let's move on.
Thank you, Prof, and thank you, Michelle, for your presentation. I must agree that the moral fabric of society is disintegrating. Now, my question then becomes, what is the next step? How do we as young adults and future leaders within society rebuild and reinvent a socially responsible social unit, both within our universities and society more broadly? I understand that you said it is our collective responsibility to look within ourselves, but as a wealth of knowledge as an elder, I want the blueprint from you.
The next question.
All right, thank you very much. First of all, I humbly accept your challenge and your task. But I also have a challenge for you. Is that a lot has happened in our country, and we know from state capture and everything. And I have also seen silence from very influential people like yourself, man. And I would, as much as we can put pressure, I also want to know what pressure are the elders or people who are very influential like yourself, what pressure are you actually putting on those in public office? Because from where I have been observing, there's been a lot of silence from some of the very influential voices. Thank you.
Yeah. And now this is too liberal.
He's a scientist, by the way.
Yes, he's the same. Well, this is still working, right? Yes. Look, I will reply to this as a social activist, not necessarily as, of course, because I'm not an academic. But I believe that one of the precious attributes of being human is to be free. There's no such thing of being of restricting your freedom, or even society to restrict your freedom as a way of aligning with a past which was very oppressive, because it can be too much, as you call, very liberal. I think if you look at from the concept, the liberation movements which established themselves, they were striving for freedom, 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 in the broad sense of all freedoms. And of course, freedom comes also with responsibility. And so what we should be discussing is whether in this liberal, as you call it, the liberal dispensation, what are the responsibilities we have with the citizens? But not to put it in a way that perhaps we should be a little bit more, tight, because we have to align with the past we have. I don't think it works that way. I think it's a question of making clear within the freedom of being yourself, with the freedom of making choices, is to choose to do good instead of choosing to do evil. It is part of it. That's what I'm asking, that how do we get about this? And me as a social activist, I can articulate my deep concerns, but I do not know how to deal with this. That's why I'm coming to you as scientists, okay? So that's the point. But please remember that with all the imperfections, which the older generations, I'm talking of those generations on somebody I'm close to, you know very well. With all the imperfections of what they have led us to, the best, absolutely the best gift they have given to all of us is freedom. And that we should never question. And so, with freedom comes responsibility. And with that responsibility is that, yes, you are free to be yourself, but you don't have the right to infringe in the rights of the others. That's the first. The second one is, you are asking, but how can we, as young South Africans, how can we deal? I'm talking of the individual, etc. I think what you have as a students' organization, talking of universities, because that's where you are. But you have students' organizations, you have youth organizations in your churches, you have cultural organizations in which young people are working together. That's the space. That's the space I would say, take it very seriously. Because transformation also has to be achieved, and has to be worked on, and to be achieved collectively, as I said. You have to work on your own imperfections as individual, but within a context of a collective. And if you look back, particularly in the history of Africa, you know, the biggest change makers, they came from students' movements. Let's look back. They came from students' movements. So it's also the responsibility of students' movements of today to dream big and also to say what kind of South Africa, in this case, what kind of South Africa we want to leave for your children and grandchildren. And work on that collectively. You know, when the Sisulus and others started, of course they were really, I even asked them, but how did you know that you're going to achieve freedom in your lifetime? Because I would think it had been an impossible job. Perhaps they could have, we started this, even if we don't live to see it, but they were very convinced that they are going to achieve freedom in their lifetime, and they did. Now you have to devise clearly what are the challenges of your time, of your historical time, and what do you want to achieve, for instance, in the next 10, 20 years. As you are active, you are at the best of your energy as young people, and actually with much better tools as education as you have. And you have also the opportunity of connecting with the experiences of other people in the world in a question of seconds, which those generations in the past, they didn't have that. They had to go one by one of the countries to mobilize. No, you can mobilize, sitting at the roads as you are. You mobilize the country, you mobilize the world. So with the privileges which you have, I think for me, it's an opportunity to decide exactly in which way you want to make a mark in history, in changing our society. Now, some of you might have come from families which I mentioned, which you have some emotional gaps. I understand that. Then perhaps it's also an issue to say, what do we do with those children who have these emotional gaps? And it's not their fault. It's simply they were not provided with the environment to do that. What do we do with young people who have this? I don't have the answers, my son. I don't have the answers. I'm raising issues which we have to deal with, and perhaps collectively to say, what do we do? except that we cannot continue to ignore it and to move ahead as if nothing is happening with us. The third one was silence from very influential people. Well, I will respond about me personally, but first I want to say there are very influential people in this country who have come out in an organized way, the so-called stalwarts. You can't find a better way. These are ANC people. They fought. I mean, now most of them, if you see them when they meet, really they are old, but they gave their youth exactly for the organization and for the freedom of our country. When they take the courage to come and question their own organization, their own leader, and to say, this is not the organizations we fought for, I don't think you need another expression of, yeah. Now, if you ask, why you, Mrs. Machel, you're not coming openly, I'm going to be very frank. I'm going to be very frank. You know, I am Mozambican by birth, okay? And I married somebody who was, I don't know how many times taller than I am. And I made a choice. That it would be complicated for me to be politically active in the sense you are asking, or being very vocal, you know, in South Africa. It would be problematic. And I don't want to go to our family history and our family relationships and all this. There are people who are better positioned to be vocal, and they are in the Mandela family than I am. But I chose to be active through Madiba's institutions. I've been while he was still with us, and I am until today, through the Nelson Mandela Foundation, through the Children's Fund, and through the recent, the Children's Hospital, which we managed, fortunately, to build after Madiba passed on. It's a way of being there, but without challenging the space of other members of our family. You see what I'm trying to say? You understand where I'm getting to? I'm not putting myself in a situation where I say it is not my business. It is absolutely my business. And for instance, through the foundation, the Nelson Mandela Foundation, we organize different kind of dialogues with different people, including with political leaders. We don't make it, I mean, it's like public stuff, but to be in a room to say, hey guys, what is happening here? I don't know whether you know, for instance, we did also facilitate, not alone, we did facilitate discussions about with the fees must fall leadership. Not to question, I mean, the right to students to that. The only thing we were saying is, don't destroy property, don't destroy libraries, because if you want education, you can't destroy library. Where are you going to learn from? So this kind of dialogue we do, not in, you see what I mean? Yeah, but we are, just to tell you that I personally am active, but in a low profile, while they are in the ANC people, I think you should give them the credit that it takes courage to say, we are not going to accept this. Okay? Other questions?
Young people would like to ask a question. That's a question here and here.
Mine is not a question. I'm so delighted I came. I nearly didn't come to the talk for some reason. I lecture Social 1, Sociology 1, and I'm currently lecturing on social change. And the past week I've been talking about change in the family. And you started, like you had my lecture slides. You started with the and I'm a great believer, I don't lecture, I preach. Especially in social change and especially on domestic violence, which I did yesterday. And I started with religion. Thankfully, on Tuesday, I talked on religion to question how graphic I was going to be, to drive the point home that you've so well articulated now of why are we not outraged as Africa. And I asked particularly my male students in class, and I was speaking to them not as a lecturer, but as an activist, almost like an activist. And I'm so thankful that you have this one. The only concern I have is when you're trying to ask the women to have outrage. I didn't hear you saying the men.
That is true. You are absolutely. And we have a very small, still, but we have a very small community of men who have come, not in my name. I think this is what they call, no, they didn't call it, they don't call them not in my name, but it's something like brothers, etc. Yeah, there is already. But yeah, you are absolutely right. We need to have much more men who are saying those who violate children, young children, women, and elderly, they are not men. It's exactly to say they are not men. Yeah. So yeah, you are absolutely right. I take the criticism. I didn't talk about that.
Thank you so much, and thanks, Mom. I don't think this is a question. Mine is to say I'm also honored to have you, since in my department of anthropology we study about childhood and all these kind of things that we touched, and we happened to learn your articles, how you were engaged in the study of childhood. So mine is to critique a little bit, because in our society now of so many social injustices in a country that is labeled as a democratic country, I also think that there must be a challenge somewhere, because the country has the constitution, the country has a very wonderful one that says rights. But is it not that we are having a contradiction between what does the constitution say and what these rights say to us? Because the right would say everyone has the right for this and that way. But does that speak to the society, the communitarian society that we are having in Africa in particular? And then the other question would be, because the law is taking over, because all these incidents are referred to law, but where is the custodian of the law? Does the law come with the constitution or with the democracy? Or because the court might be somewhere to go, but if you give the credit to the law in the magistrate court, someone there is saying, okay, it's not my problem. Think if you can give someone the crops to have in their gardens, and think how they going to take care of that crop, than if you say, okay, this garden is mine, just look at it. They will steal that vegetable and you won't get anything. And I think that's the approach that we need to construct when we're thinking about these things, to give title to the societies that this is your society, you have to take care, you have to embrace yourselves. You see, we used to have chiefs, we used to have in local societies, authorities, people who are collectively looking of what is wrong and right. And those people's right to do so has been taken away by the bureaucracy that we have in our society now. Thank you.
So, if I can just try to paraphrase your question for everybody.
He said it was not even a question. He said it was a critique.
So there's a disconnect to assume that the Constitution is going to solve our problems. And secondly, the law is deficient in dealing with day-to-day issues. Is that a fair assessment?
No.
Says that the law is not taking care of the people, but what I'm saying is that in which the way the law has been given to people, it implies something that is contrary to how we are organizing ourselves. Because in the society we have been dealing with things in many different ways. So if you say, okay, there is a law, and then you say, okay, there is a law, but we do not know how to use this law. We do not know how to regulate this law because we have our own different way, and we cannot run away from the fact that the global society now is more connected to our local. So the import of ideas and strategies to deal with things is at some point clashing to what we have locally. So I think those things, what we do.
No, I'm not so sure what I'm going to answer. And I'm not even sure whether I can do some kind of critique. Listen, what I believe is that it's not necessarily a contradiction. I think the different ways in which we are organized as micro societies have to be a sort of pillars which allow us to grow to what as a nation we have to adopt as the South African way of dealing with our issues. So it's not a contradiction, but I believe there is a process of the two somewhere coming and meet each other. And what has not happened yet is that they haven't met yet. But I don't think we should put it in terms of a contradiction. Because these are the African ways of organizing, which not all of them, by the way, not all of them are democratic. They might be ours, but they are not democratic. So in that meeting, it's exactly how do you take the best of what is our way of being Africans to enrich the South African space in which the law has to make us equal. Did I make myself clear? So that would be my
So what we do now? So there are going to be three more questions, and I ask that you please keep the questions short now. So there was somebody here, lady there, and then right at the back. So I did acknowledge you, right? So short question at the back.
Thank you so much, and thank you for joining us today. I guess my question is on one of the social ills you have touched on, and it's the apathy we find in society, and the will to instigate change in our societies.
As a social justice activist, self-proclaimed, and very widely recognized social justice activist, how have you combated this apathy when you've come across it, and how would you suggest that as young people we combat it in each other? Because young people in the country, and my personal experience has been that they look at our problems and they're like, I'm one person, I can't do anything about it. So how have you confronted this apathy, and how would you suggest that we confront this apathy?
Ma'am, so take your question now. Please stand up.
Good evening. Thank you, Mama, so much for the talk. In your talk, you specifically outlined the role of family in sustaining the value systems that exist in our communities. I just wanted to ask, from your perspective, how do you think the value systems can be sustained when families in South Africa right now are broken and mothers are out working? So how can we sustain that in families, specifically the black unit or the black families? How would we do that? Thank you.
And then the last question at the back.
Mama, my thing is just people like a way forward towards the young student movement. I want to touch on the Fees Must Fall generation and how they burn libraries, but yet they want this thing. But at the same time, I've noticed throughout the years, many influential people like you, they might tell us as young people that don't burn the libraries, don't do this, but like at the same time not speaking on the violence coming from the state. You know, as we see with recently, Home Kositani getting arrested throughout, from October till February, I think. Yeah, but he spent his Christmas day just for protesting Fees Must Fall. And Musisi was here as well, was arrested by the ANC government. So mine is just to ask that, as you can see now, like the student movement is kind of dead or quiet, or maybe you're confusing the enemy. But how do we go forward as Fees Must Fall, but moving away from the normal way we've been doing it, as in shutdowns, experiencing this form of violence? So how do we approach our vice chancellors and the university community and take it to the state in a safe way without experiencing this different forms of violence, whether it be physical from the police, whether it be exclusions from the university, and whether it be threats from the government?
The first one is apathy. I think you are asking a question which I was actually throwing to the audience. Yeah. So I don't think I have to answer this, but my point is exactly that we have to shake that apathy. How does it happen that you can see your sister being violated and you remain in apathy? Is what I'm trying to say? So perhaps I would say, amongst you, students, in your organizations, because you are here at university, and perhaps in your community churches as well, you have to begin to say, what is happening with us? What happened to our consciousness that we, as I was saying, we tolerate and we say it's not my business? It has to be your business. It is your business. You know, when people say, Mrs. Michelle is a renowned, as you were trying to say, I don't see myself there. I don't see myself there. My issue is that I simply cannot keep quiet when I see the kind of atrocities which are being committed against children and youth. I cannot. I mean, I can't, you know, I don't want to dramatize here. There are days when I can't sleep when I see certain things. How on earth these things are happening again and again, as if the effort of many of us who are saying no, it doesn't look like we are making any difference. So, sorry. You question yourself, whatever we are doing, is it really making an impact? And when you come to a certain age like mine, sorry, then you wonder what your life has been worth. So it's up to you to find your own way, because we found our own way differently, and that's why we are still vocal. So you also have to find your own way. Thank you. The second one is.
Second question was about the family value system, how can it be sustained?
Yeah, because now I spoke of many young people who did not have the privilege, actually, of having, brought up in this. We have a serious crisis of family structure in society. So you are asking me, how do we deal with it? Baby, that's what I brought to you. And I explained, I said, because you are scientists and you have the tools, or you can find the tools. And perhaps many of the, when you're doing your postgrad, some of your research is exactly how to rebuild the South African family structure in a context where we face all these adversities, including the one of HIV, which is not our making, okay? So I'll take it back to you, but I would suggest the following. It's just a suggestion. Is that perhaps we need to give much more time to look at our neighborhoods, where we live. It takes a lot of time, it will require a lot of energy, but isn't it possible to have kind of organizations where 20 families in a neighborhood, I'm saying 20 because I think it's manageable, 20 families coming to know one another, supporting one another, and even when there isn't a mother, but other ladies can be mothers to this child. Is what I'm trying to say? I know it will require a lot of energy to make it work, because we have taken for granted that the fact that we are in towns, we cannot recreate the connections, the community connections, which are still existent in rural areas. But we can reconstruct them. It's a question of deciding this. Let me give you an example. Tanzania has a system of what they call 10 families. Julius Nyerere was brilliant on this. Whether you are in town or you are in rural areas, people are organized in groups of 10 families, which means in every 10 families, there's 1 or 2 people who know and who take the work of making people know each other, support one another, and to bring close to become that community, even in urban areas. 10 families, this is how they call it. Let me give you an example. My trust tried to understand the issue of children who are out of school. Tanzania has a quite number, millions of children are out of school. And we went to 5 districts and we said to them, look, you have children who are out of school. What are the reasons? We know the easy ones, but the difficult ones. And we went exactly to the structure of 10 families. through the 10 families, we were able to identify every single family which had children who were out of school, to profile the children, to profile the family, to understand the causes, you know, because society is organized. We would have never been able to do this without this system of 10 families. So I'm challenging, for instance, any one of us here. We live somewhere. We are here at the university, but we live somewhere. And in our church groups, for instance, we have the mothers and we have the groups of fathers, etc. Let's begin to look and say, our society needs some kind of structure. We need to organize ourselves. I do not know how to do it because it's simply an anguish which I came to share with you and say, you are in a better position to produce some kind of architecture. You remember I said architecture? Yeah, you are in a better position to produce architecture. So, baby girl, don't bring it back to me. Yeah, and then the issue of fees must fall. This is a very hot issue, and you know I'm coming also from UCT. You know, I really understand, and I have the best of empathy with students to demand free education. That is unquestionable. That is unquestionable. The thing which I am a little bit biased also because I am from the side of the adults and of the structures, and so you are also very suspicious of what we say as structures of universities. I think we need to have better communication so that whether it's the council of the university, whether it's the management, whether it's the students' unions, to communicate better about the challenges and the limitations which do exist. So that, believe me, there's no management of university which is here and deliberately is working against students. No, the reason why they're there, it's precisely because of students. Otherwise, they wouldn't be at university. What happens is the understanding of the possibilities and the limitations to meet, for instance, free education for all, I don't think is the same. And because it's not communicated in an environment of calm and serenity, where you can digest the explanation from the other side, and also you put your own views forward, but in an environment where we can listen. Many times we shout and we don't listen to each other. And that is a problem for me. And that is a problem. So you are saying, what I was saying here is that whatever are the means you want to use, don't play against yourself and don't play against your younger brothers and sisters. Because these libraries and these buildings are to serve you, for you to complete your education, but they have to serve other generations of your younger brothers and sisters who have to come here. If you burn because you are angry, it plays against yourself and it plays against those young generations. That's all I'm saying. Yes. That's all I'm saying. And I'm saying, that respect for public property and collective property, it is these properties, these ones. It is, believe me, it's the blood of your parents who build it. You see what I mean? This is the product of the struggle of your parents and grandparents for you to have this. So if you want, you have to cherish, you have to protect it for yourself, and as I'm saying, for the other generations which are going to come a bit after you. So make your case. Put your case as clear as you can, as strong as you can. But please respect the blood of your parents and grandparents, and also protect this for the sake of yourself. Because if you burn this amphitheater, then tomorrow where are you going to be sitting and have lessons? And well, as I said, also about the generations to come. So that's my point. And finally, I want to say this, which is very controversial as well. I know it's controversial, but I want you to think about it. At least the conversation we are having with some of leaders is the following. We need to categorize our students. There are students, perhaps the majority, who need to have 100% of free education, tertiary. There will be some in the middle here who might not have to have 100%. They can have 75%, depending on the agreement of how the university can afford. And then there will be others who can pay because they can. And when they can, they're not doing it for themselves alone. They are contributing for the university to be able to finance those who will need the 75% and those who will need 100%. You see what I'm trying to say? And we did have, at UCT for instance, parents who came and said, you know what, we can pay and we are ready to continue to pay, and even more. We are prepared to contribute for a fund which is going to allow those children who cannot pay so that they can have the same possibility. It is a question of the budget of the university as we speak. I'm talking of UCT, and I don't want to be involved in roads. I don't know how things are here. I'm just giving examples, okay? We say, as we stand, for us to be able to absorb more students coming, for us to give the quality of education we want to, for us to be able to provide the resources for research, because our tertiary institution, it's not a secondary school where you're just teaching. You need to research, you need to have publications and all this stuff. For us to continue to do that, the budget of the university cannot afford to give to everyone. But there is a more important principle, is that once you decide in 2017 that education is free, tertiary education is free for everybody, it is going to be that from now forever. It is not a measure for your generation alone. And that is the problem of saying the economy of South Africa can afford to bring from primary to tertiary totally free education or not. So it's not only the tertiary institutions which are at stake, it's also the other, flow of groups which have to come. Once you institute this principle, you have to give it to everyone forever. You don't go back anymore. And this is the kind of a conversation where many times we don't have in a peaceful. You know why you're listening to me now? Do you know why? Because I'm not Rhodes member of council, or if I was the chancellor who is not here, you would have interrupted, you would have started shouting, whoa, whoa. No, that is not the issue. I'm trying to take you to think. And as I was saying, when you asked about how we contribute, we did have a meeting with some of the leaders of Fees Must Fall, just to try to explain this. We said, can we? And then they said, the answer was, one of the answers is, oh, but if you take the money which is wasted in corruption, you can fund education. Perhaps part of it, simply part of it. But it's not total. No. We need to fight corruption. We need the public monies to be used really effectively. But believe me, perhaps even if we are using effectively the monies we have, we wouldn't be able to pay tertiary education for everyone from now on forever. We wouldn't be. And that's the kind of conversation sometimes in a serene manner, and I know you hate me for saying this at the end of my lecture, and it's going to jeopardize all the conversations we have. Because now we end up with this hot issue, which is very emotional, in which I'm sure I didn't convince you. I know I didn't convince you, but we have to share, to give you elements of thinking. What are you asking? Is it really possible from 2017 until the year of 2050 and 60 forever? Because you don't go back anymore. That's your instituted. And you know that South African economy is going down. Are you aware of that? Are you aware of that? Do you know how many people are paying taxes in this country? I mean, in terms of population. We have there are some people who are saying we are in between 5 to 10% of our population. They are the ones who are paying really big, because SARS is very good on that. But do you remember that we have 16 million South Africans who are in grants? You remember? And they are not paying taxes, they can't pay. You remember that? So there's lots of issues which have to deal with. And I'm not in any way trying to protect this government. No. I'm just saying there are lots of issues we have to put on the table when we see what is possible and what is not possible. I think we should stop here. I want to sit today and look at those who are for the city. Can I?
Please request your forbearance now, because we just have some awards that we'd like to give out. I'd like to call upon Zungu to join me here. And then if I could ask Mrs. Teresa Mava and Mr. Nagla Mlungeni. And Ron Bosco, please come up. We're very grateful this year that First National Bank have donated some monetary prizes to our economics students. And it's a new award introduced this year to further promote excellence in academic writing and subject knowledge within the Rose Business School. We had a very high quality participation. The top 4 students in the MBA Economics module submitted for blind adjudication. The identity of the authors were not disclosed to the judges. The judges were myself, Professor Gavin Keaton, and Professor Charles Waite from Nelson Mandela University. The research assignment requires students to examine the relationship between economic growth and inequality in at least 6 countries, with the view of proposing policy for South Africa that would improve human development and reduce inequality. With reference to the winning essay, some of the adjudicated comments are as follows. I like the highlighting of comprehensiveness. It was useful to consider factors such as unemployment and child mortality, which give different perspectives. It also highlighted some critical insights in considering growth. The measurements between the countries were consistent and it provided some practical suggestions for South Africa. So moving on to the awards now, in third place, receiving an award of 2,000 Rand from First National Bank, Dino Giovanni. In second place, receiving an award of 3,000 Rand from First National Bank and 750 Rand book vouchers from Sherwood Books, Apiwe Nkosumlini. And the winner of the inaugural FMB Prize for India Economics, receiving an award of 15,000 Rand from First National Bank and 750 Rand in book vouchers from Sherwood Books, John Hartsfield. Thank you very much. Dino, as part of the endowment from the Archbishop Thabo Makgoba Development Trust, an award is made each year to the student who obtains the highest mark for the responsible leadership assignment. And the winner, one of the co-winners of last year's here this evening. I think both of you are here, in fact, yes. So, Dino, your assignment, and I read the citation, it was proposed to incorporate an undergraduate integrated leadership development program within the science faculty at Rhodes University. The objective would be to provide some essential leadership training to all science undergraduate students to ensure that they would enter the workforce better equipped for the modern world. Several heads of department and or senior academic staff across the faculty were interviewed in order to assess what leadership skills are being developed, either explicitly or implicitly, within the existing undergraduate curricula, to determine how the skill is being developed and to discuss ideas for how curricula could be modified in order to integrate leadership development within their respective departments. The leadership development model was created in which leadership development is viewed as a journey of personal growth. The model incorporates the development of self-leadership through various personality and task-oriented goals, then moves on to the required attributes required for leading others, and finally how to lead others. A number of activities were proposed in order to develop certain specific skills along this journey, and they were designed to enhance communication skills, interdisciplinary collaboration, and group work. Furthermore, to nurture creativity and innovation by confronting students with new challenges, having students who can inspire and motivate others, while also creating an awareness of a broad range of ethical issues in science. There would be considerable future work required for future implementation of the program, and several implementation issues were identified. I now ask Mrs. Makgoba to hand over the prize to you, and well done.
This one is not working here. If you need this one, so just try to.
Now, I do promise to not take up much more of your time. I will really just try once to see if I can get the Archbishop. Your Grace, please proceed.
Hello.
Your Grace, you may proceed. We can hear you, thank you.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, I just want to say to Mama Marcel,
Okay, we did try. Once again, on behalf of Rose Hill School, Rose University, heartfelt thanks to the Archbishop and the Trust and Mrs. Mahoba for supporting this initiative, because it's not just done at Rhodes University. I think we need to point that out too. And I guess going back to the question at the back there, it was raised about what should we do. It's only through the collective will of the family of the universities and students we mobilize in a particular way that we can affect the kind of change that we know needs to happen. And it's these kinds of conversations that instill what it is that we need to do. I'd now like to just ask Mrs. Michelle and Mrs. Mahoba to please just come up again, because we'd just like to give you a gift, ma'am, if you don't mind. I'm going to be naughty and request that I at least allow to kiss you on the cheek. So, Mrs. Mahoba, you did indicate that you didn't want to talk, but you can hold it up.
This is a really exciting moment. First of all, we absolutely love you. And thank you for being part of our family. This is a little naughty, and the Archbishop has written a book that Mama gave her absolute blessing for, and she wrote the foreword. So this is very much a baby that you nurtured yourself as well as the Archbishop. Thank you.
I'd like to call upon our past president, Mr. Sakile Mboti, who was one of the joint winners of the award last year for responsible leadership, to give the vote of thanks and to hand over the gift to Mrs. Michelle. And Sakile, I got the kiss him first.
Okay, Mama, thank you very much. On behalf of the business school and my colleagues, we really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to come and visit us here tonight. And really your talk, it spoke into our principle of leadership for sustainability to stand for the school. And I think you left us with a huge task. And I think it's a task that we accept and we should respond to. And thank you very much.
So that concludes our event, and we thank you very much for